Kia ora katoa, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, MUV Talks team, for inviting me back. So it's great to be back after 3 years. So tonight we heard a lot of great stories. And just like others, I really took the topic, Milestones, seriously. And that was a great opportunity for me because I had this chance to finally sit down and reflect on what happened in last few years. So I put everything together and I put 35 slides together and I didn't actually practice. And today at 1 o'clock, and I went through all of them and it took 45 minutes. And I just said, okay, it's 7 minutes. So I just had the option, before COVID, after COVID. And I thought everybody gonna talk about lesson learned in 2020. I picked the first half. So I chopped it to 1/3. And tonight I'm going to share with you some of the stories of my life, some of the things I learned through different milestones. But we all know life is full of lessons. Some of them are easy because they follow on our success. Some of them are really difficult because they teach us about ourselves and they teach us about our mistakes. Some of them we have to repeat a few times because we need to understand them. But I want to start by telling you a few stories from different time. This one started from when I was 7. So when I was 7 years old, I remember my dad, he took me to one of those computer hardware stores to build a motherboard. So he wanted to build his own computer, and I remember I was fascinated with all computer parts, and for the remainder of that day, our dining table was covered in screwdrivers, computer parts, and anti-static strap. And I remember at the time that I was more fascinated about that electronic component more than what you can actually do with the assemble machine. But the lesson I learned at that time was you're never too old or too young to start. And interestingly, a few years ago here in New Zealand, I was in charge of developing a course about computer hardware components. And I get to play again. And I think I really have to thank my dad for being an instrumental person in introducing me to technology from early on. And as some of you might know, really? Did I press everything? Sorry. Yeah, that's on. Yeah, so you're never too young or too old to start. And as some of you may know, I'm originally from Iran. I moved to New Zealand 12 years ago, and I did my bachelor's and master's degree both in Iran in a school of engineering. But in Iran, getting to university is very different from New Zealand. And it is very, very competitive. So much so that every year around 1 to 2 million students, they go through university entrance exam, and only 10% they get to study in the major that they want, based on their score. So here in New Zealand, we take so much things for granted. We have double major, we can change. But you can imagine, my last year of high school, it was one of the most stressful time of my life. I used to play sport and play music. I had to stop everything and study really hard. I knew from the start I wanted to study engineering, but I knew at the same time it is one of the very difficult majors to get into. The lesson I learned at that time, to achieve something great, you have to work really hard, and it requires a lot of commitment and dedication. And I learned it early on in my career path. As I started progressing through my career, I quickly realized that I'm one of the very few girls in my classes. So I was usually the only girl in a class of 50, 60 students. So being part of minority, it was daunting. But I think the biggest challenge at the time for me was moving past the idea of being part of minority somehow hinder my success. And I think the lesson learned for me at that time was just because you're part of minority doesn't mean that I was inferior or I possibly can really succeed. And I think this is something that I'm reminding all my students, even today, because we still, as you can see, we're suffering from a huge gender imbalance and gender gap in this field. So it's just amazing for me to see someone like Amelia, they're trying hard, they're championing in this field to get our kids, interested to technology and STEM from very early on. So, 2008, I decided to pursue my study toward PhD, and my father, again, he encouraged me to check different opportunities in different countries. I applied for many different universities in different countries, and finally I decided to go to Monash University in Melbourne. Everything was set to go. A week before going to Melbourne, I got an email from Massey University, Auckland, New Zealand, and a scholarship. So receiving a scholarship for 3 years PhD, it was tempting enough for me to change all my plans. So I decided to move to New Zealand. And as it turned out for me, I met my future husband here in New Zealand. My husband and my daughter, they're sitting there. So PhD journey, it was a roller coaster. It was probably one of the hardest times of my life. Second year through my PhD, I got the full-time job as a lecturer at university. So I worked from 8 o'clock till 5 in the evening, studied from 6 till midnight. And my area of work is artificial intelligence and natural language processing. So my game was just playing catch-up with technology. As some of you know, if you're doing PhD, you have to do something novel. So I was worried all the time. So that my game was, trying to beat the time and just, finish my PhD in time. So I think what I learned from that time is opportunities often represent themselves for a very short amount of time. And sometimes hesitating can mean missing out. And perseverance was key for me through my PhD. As I said, I learned I have to work very hard, and I shouldn't give up before achieving what I set my mind into. Another story I want to tell you is 2010. I heard about this scholarship, and the scholarship was Google Anita Burgess Scholarship. The scholarship was a fund as well as 2 days travel to Google headquarters in Sydney and getting opportunity to work with Google engineers on some of the cutting-edge technology projects. It was my dream. I worked really hard. I put my heart and mind into applications, and I went through a few different phone interviews. After a few weeks, I got an email. My application wasn't successful, and I got rejected. So it's sometimes really hard, especially when you work really hard for something, receiving news like that are really demotivating. A year after that, 2012, with a little bit of perseverance from my friends, I decided to apply again. This time I applied, and I selected as one of the finalists. As a result of that, I got an invitation to go to Google headquarters, which was amazing. But I didn't win, and I wasn't a winner of the scholarship. But it was a great experience. 2013 was my last year of my PhD and my last opportunity to applying for a scholarship, because that scholarship was only for students. I just thought, let's give it a try one more time. I'm not going to lose anything. So I applied for it. And this time, again, I become a finalist for this award. But this time, surprisingly, when I was in that retreat, they announced me as one of the first New Zealand participant and a representative of New Zealand receiving this scholarship. So the lesson I think I learned that time, that never let your failure to make you give up. If I give up in the first time and I got rejected, even after second time when I was a finalist, I wouldn't go any further. And I just believe that the only way to 100% guarantee failure is not to try it in the first place. Receiving Google Anita Burgess Scholarship was really an amazing and life-changing chapter in my life. Hearing about Anita Burgess, an American computer scientist who devoted her life to changing and improving and empowering women in tech, really inspired me. I came back from that retreat and I started She-Sharp with a group of students from different universities, a group of 25 students to start with. And after that, we start working hard, and today we have over 1,000 members. And we've worked with so many amazing ambassadors, and one of the greatest one is sitting here, so we have Emily in the room. So what I learned from that, it is so rewarding to work with the group of individuals that they all have the same common goal, and this time for us was the most needed goal that we were all trying to achieve, and working together gradually, but surely witnessing success. And it was all the time during that time reminded me of the quote from Margaret Mead: never doubt the small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that ever has. And finally, I had another 35 slides that I had to cut. And I just thought, okay, so looking over my life, if I want to have top 3 things that I learned, first one is never afraid to step out of your comfort zone and try new things. You won't know about your availability, your capability, if you don't give yourself opportunity to try. The second big one for me was never forget those who have helped and supported you along the way. Those that made sacrifices for you and they paved your way to success. I remember at Massey University when I was a student, there was a sign there, and it was from Isaac Newton, and it said, if I have seen further, it is because of standing on the shoulder of giants. Isn't it amazing? And finally, the last lesson I learned, that I still have so much more to learn. So thank you so much.